Well, that was an experience, just getting here. This unfortunate GoPro Hero 9 Black took a tumble off this mount here. Basically, one of the plastic GoPro mounts ended up breaking. Took a tumble down the road. You can see how scratched up it is now and cracked, but it still works, and the main thing is that the lens hasn't been cracked, so I'm pretty happy with that. Anyway, guys and gals, welcome back. So today we've got the wicked Kawasaki Ninja 125, and we're going to bring you some beginner content in the way of how to brake a motorcycle. Well, not how to brake one, but how to stop a motorcycle, rather. Braking is the act that you do to stop the bike. Now, a lot of people get excited, not new riders, get excited about the whole going aspect of riding a motorcycle, but kind of the whole stopping part is more like an afterthought. And, well, there's a lot of intricacies behind stopping a motorcycle that you may not know about. At least I especially did not know about these kinds of braking techniques. I'm just going to adjust my new little mount here. There we go, so I can get the GoPro a bit more lined up so we're not as skew with. But yeah, so in today's video we're going to go over a few things that you've probably heard about, but you might not have never actively tried to do. So the first one is progressive braking, or preloading the front brakes. Now this is something that I think I've mentioned before in a previous video, but I've not actually demonstrated it before. And also a few other little tips and tricks when it comes to stopping a motorcycle safely, especially when you are moving both at speed and moving at slow speeds. I mean, there's one thing that the wifey kind of struggles with when she's riding this bike, and it's anticipating when the traffic is about to move. So I'll demonstrate what she does. So let's imagine that I'm going to be coming up to a red light and there's traffic in front of me. I'll tell you what, no, in fact, there's no traffic, just an ordinary red light. Right, so imagine the red light is on, so she comes to a complete stop and then it changes, and then she's got to reset and then off she goes again, you know? And that can be, on a motorcycle, that can be kind of dangerous, because there's going to be drivers behind you, no doubt, that are going to be anticipating you moving off, and they could rear-end you. So what do you do in that instance? Well, you do something that actually a few of you have mentioned in the comments before when we've been talking about beginner riding techniques, and that is to actually try and balance the bike. So I'm stopping, all right, my feet aren't down, I'm still moving forward ever so slightly, because if you move forward it's actually easier to balance the bike, right? And in that time, if you are anticipating that the lights are going to change, then that is where you would use a technique like that. Or another example, let's say that we are again coming up to a red light, so imagine that blue cone's the red light. I'm already starting to slow down, you know, so I'm just edging forward towards the light. Oh, and then the light's changed, now I can move off. You see? So there's a few techniques that you can do like that which are easier to do. But yeah, the whole balancing thing is a big one. So let's see if we can. Now, I'm not going to balance this bike forever because I'm not actually that good at balancing motorcycles, but I will say on a 125 it is easier. There we go. I could have held it a little bit longer, but let's try again. It's a fun little game that you can actually play with yourself at a red light or something like that. So as you stop, you try to keep the bike upright without putting your feet on the floor. Had too much brake. I mean, that's the one thing that a lot of people make the mistake of doing when it comes to balancing a motorcycle in terms of braking, is braking too much, right? So if I brake too much, then I've got no choice. I've got to put my foot down, right? But if I brake gently, if I brake slowly, right? So I can brake hard to begin with, so I'm braking hard, and then I'm letting off the brake. Okay, I'm letting off the brake. Ah! I try keeping it upright then, but yeah, it gets hard. It's not an easy thing to do, but this is one of those things that will come with time as you practice. Well, let's try again up here. So brake hard, then letting off the brake. Ah! I tried to stop before that line where the tarmac changes, but yeah, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, some people make it look really easy. Right, let's try again here. So I'm actually stopping well before the tarmac changes, so I've got a little bit of room to... Oh, I put the brake on. So I've got a little bit of room to move the bike forward, but it's actually... I'm going to say impossible. It might not be impossible, but for me, it is absolutely impossible to try and do this with the brake on. You have to have the brake off. All right. I mean, you can use like the rear brake to do this, but see, I'm reaching the line now, so I've got to stop. But you know what I mean. So I mean, speaking of controlling the bike, when it comes to slowing down, it's the same with a car as well. When you come to a complete stop, so again, let's use this blue cone again. When you come to a complete stop, so you brake hard. You know, you really brake hard, and you shouldn't do that. So people they will stay clamped on the brake as they come to a stop. But if you want a nice controlled stop, let's go to this orange cone here. So you brake hard, but then you actually let off the brake very, very gently. You let off the pressure. Then from here, you can gently put your foot down on the ground. All right, this is one of the things that the pros will do a lot. Well, the pros, the vets, the riding veterans. So let's try again here when where the tarmac changes colour. So braking hard, and I'm letting off the brake. Okay, at the moment, I haven't got any brake on. You see? And then from here, I can just put my foot down whenever I want to. All right. But yeah, when it comes to, it's not about just stopping the bike. It's about stopping the bike in a controlled manner. All right. Let's try again here. So I've got the clutch in, clutch out a little bit. Ah, okay. Because that's another thing that you can do is try and hold the balance of the bike up until the light changes, and then it's it's a little game that you can play just whilst you're out and about riding. But let's next talk about progressive braking, because this is something that a lot of people I think get a little bit confused by. So let's stop in a parking area here so I can demonstrate what progressive braking is. All right. So, progressive braking, this is the opposite of progressive braking. Okay? That is the exact opposite of progressive braking. So, it kind of says it in the name, where you will grab the brake and you will slowly kind of what's known as preload. So, you're putting a little bit of pressure on the lever, not quite enough to necessarily bite the brakes all that hard. Like, look, I put a little bit of pressure on and I'm still able to move the bike with my feet. Okay? But then as soon as I put down a little bit more pressure, just a little teeny tiny bit, then the bike decides to stop. All right, and this is the problem, is that when you're braking and you're braking hard, the weight of the bike wants to move forward. But if you don't give it a chance to move forward, then that is when things like the front wheel can lock up, and the bike will basically dive bomb like this or that way, depending on which way your wheel is facing. And yeah, that's not very fun. I know from personal experience. Yeah, that absolutely sucks. And I didn't know about progressive braking. And even though this Ninja 125 has got ABS brakes, you can do progressive braking, or is encouraged to do progressive braking on any motorcycle anyway. All right. So progressive braking. Let's go up to the blue cone up here. So I've already got my fingers, a little bit of pressure on the brake, more. Okay, and when it comes to emergency braking, that is especially important. All right, so I'm gonna try an emergency brake here. All right, so I gave the brakes just a little bit, and then I gently, gradually squeeze the pressure on. And that's how you actually brake really effectively. Alright, because if I jammed on the brake with all my fingers and I really clamped onto it hard, the bike isn't going to stop, because it hasn't had the opportunity to transfer weight over the front tyre. And on a motorcycle, most of the braking is being done by the front tyre. I mean, that is why you've got a really massive brake rotor on the front and a big caliper on the front and a teeny tiny one on the back. because the front brake is doing 80 to 90% of the work, and more often than not 100% of the work. When you're emergency braking, the one thing you don't actually want to do is use the rear brake, because think about it, as you're braking, the bike is moving forward towards the front end, so the weight is being transferred forward. What happens to the rear end of the bike is the suspension wants to push the rear end of the bike upwards, and it kind of takes a bit of the weight off the rear tire. And so in that stage, in that sort of scenario, you're just going to end up locking the rear brake. So there's kind of no point really in using it. You're just going to give yourself less control of the brake, of the bike as you are braking, all right? So I'm not using any front brake here. Excuse me, I'm not using any rear brake there. All right, it's all on the front brake, and that's how it should be. All right, you want to compress that front suspension, boom. You want to compress that front suspension, compress that front tire, and you'll get the most amount of braking force possible, the most you want. All right. Wow, I even locked up the front brake there a little bit. That's interesting. This thing, even under progressive braking, there's still a possibility that you're actually going to lock up the front wheel, but it's under control, so you're still going to get a nice amount of grip, even though the wheel is skidding, then stop skidding, getting grip, skidding, getting grip, skidding, getting grip, and that's basically what ABS does. It pumps the brake, so it doesn't apply 100% of the brake at any one time. It's that pulsating kind of action, pulsating pressure that gives you more grip. All right, so progressive braking. And believe it or not, even at slow speeds, progressive braking can be a real lifesaver, because you don't need that much pressure to stop yourself at slow speeds, but it's one of those things where if you do, you can also drop the bike in that instance. So applying the brake gradually, even when you are only doing slow speeds, is really important. See, I'm only applying a small amount of brake there. The less brake I'm using, the better. And then if I have to brake heavily, then I have the option to increase the pressure. But getting used to braking is very, very important on a motorcycle, as you can imagine. And it's one of those skills I'd actually recommend that you go into a parking area like this and just practice doing the hard braking, but also practice doing the gentle braking as well. All right, so you can keep the bike balanced. Yeah, I'd also recommend that you do that. Also, just again, it's all about learning more control of the bike, learning control. All right, it's really important. Okay, now all of that said, there's the technique to braking, which is really important. But perhaps even more important than braking is anticipating braking. All right, the braking anticipating that you're going to have to brake very heavily. Now we're actually going to go out onto the road here so I can demonstrate this a little bit further. But it is perhaps the most important aspect of braking or stopping a motorcycle. All right, and it's one of those things again that this is part of a motorcyclist repertoire of skills that you will learn over time, but the quicker you learn it, the better. All right, so this is all about perception. All right, anticipating what is happening in front of you. Now, there are scenarios where if you are not able to anticipate what's happening in front of you or behind you or whatever the case might be, it could end up being in a crash. All right. Now, the whole point of anticipation is that instead of you crashing, it ends up being a close call instead, which is all good. Right? A close call is something is probably an event where it should have been a crash, but because of your actions, it wasn't. All right. So it's very, very important. Now, this is one of those things that you can practice again as you're out and about riding. There's a car that was moving the opposite direction to me. Okay. Now, if, for example, there's a junction on my left here, so a car is coming towards me and they're looking to turn in this way in front of me, right?
Well, at that point, I should be anticipating them doing that. And I should be anticipating that they haven't seen me. All right, that's the main thing. That pretend or imagine that every single driver in the world has not seen you and they never will see you. And then you will learn to slow down. All right, now imagine that little section here. So it was our give way, right? So we had to give way to oncoming traffic. But imagine it was the other way around. And a driver was just barreling through, or at least you could see there was a car that was approaching from the opposite direction in one of those little areas, right? Again, you can anticipate braking. Yeah, you can anticipate it. It's almost like as if this person indicating here, right? Because they indicated, I was able to anticipate that they were going to turn in, so I'd have to start braking soon. So I came off the throttle immediately, started putting 2 fingers on the brake in anticipation of having to slow down, right? And that's the exact same attitude that you should have, regardless of whether or not cars are giving you obvious signals, regardless of whether or not you think someone is going to do something. Believe it or not, you should not be surprised when people do something ridiculously stupid, because they should have seen you, right? Or they should at least understand how things like give way work. And a lot of the time people actually don't. Common drivers don't actually know how something as simple as give way works. They don't know, right? So just pretend or imagine that everyone that is driving around you is absolutely ridiculously stupid, and they haven't got a clue how to drive. Now, even though that might be the case a lot of the time, you know, most drivers, 80% of drivers that you will encounter are actually okay, and they are considerate, and they understand give way, like this person here. They actually look, you know, because, I mean, 100% of drivers on the road don't want to cause accidents. Yeah, so keep that in mind, that nobody on the road wants to cause an accident. Nobody wants to hurt you. Well, maybe that's not 100% true either. But the vast majority of drivers on the road are not there to hurt you. But you have to treat it like as if they are. All right, and then you won't be surprised by anything. So there were some parked cars back there. I don't know if you noticed that, parked cars. Imagine if someone is trying to reverse out of those and they don't look. All right, the obvious way to tell that someone is reversing is they'll have their reversing lights on. Right, so you have that stimulus to come off the throttle and start slowing yourself down. God. Just trying to get the bike into gear there. Sometimes that happens on bikes. It's really weird where the gearbox just doesn't want to upshift, or more often than not downshift. It just doesn't want to downshift. But yeah, so you want to be looking for those stimulus. And that stimulus can literally just be that there is another car that potentially could go into your path. Yeah? So at any point, there could be a car coming around this bend. Look, right, I'm off the throttle looking to brake. As soon as you get any indication that something may obstruct your lane, you come off the throttle straight away. Now that might sound obvious. Okay, that might sound obvious, but the amount of times that actually happens, I mean, you see it so much on our reaction content where it could be avoidable. It could totally be avoidable. But it's not, because the rider hasn't anticipated that they are going to have to stop and they're going to have to brake hard. It's too late. By the time they realize it's too late. And the idea is that you want to give yourself as much time as possible to emergency brake. You don't want to give yourself the shortest amount of time possible, because more often than not it's not going to work. The bike is either going to lock up and come out from underneath you, the wheels, or you're simply going to crash. As simple as that. Oh, these kids want me to rev, but this bike hasn't got a lot of guts, you know. Yeah, it's a Ninja 125, but it hasn't got a lot. Maybe if we stuck on some aftermarket exhaust, then maybe we'd be a little bit less embarrassed to rev the bike out. But this is not our motorcycle that is all that impressive when you rev it out, unfortunately. But it's a learner bike, so what do you expect? All right. Now, the reason why I use 2 fingers on the brakes, now we have actually done a video like this with the wifey. I think this was in the winter of last year, or it might have been the autumn of last year, where we went over kind of braking techniques with the wifey to try and make her braking a little bit safer and a little bit more controlled, because it's very easy to lose control of a motorcycle when you're braking very, very hard. Same goes to when you are accelerating very, very quickly. You can quite easily lose control of the bike if you're not careful. All right. So braking is just as important, if not more important, than learning how to use the clutch. You know, moving off, using the throttle. Right. Those are things that everyone wants to know, and everyone is like really concerned about. But actually, it's the whole braking process that should be more of a concern to most riders. But the reason why I use two fingers on the brake lever, right? All brakes on modern bikes, I think anywhere up to like the 80s, right? They are hydraulic brakes, so you don't have to use a lot of pressure to stop the bike. So it's one of those things where, why are you using the grip strength of your whole hand when you don't need to? So that's a very, very good habit to get into. It'll give you far more control of the bike if you are using two fingers to slow down. Right, so you had to brake there suddenly, but I didn't jam on the brake. I slowly applied pressure and applied gradual pressure as I needed to slow down quicker. And you can slow down incredibly fast using progressive braking, more than you think, even though you're giving yourself a split second there to apply pressure gently and then apply pressure harder and faster. It's weird. It doesn't even make much sense, but it works. It really works. Progressive braking is one of those things that really can save your bacon. But yeah, using those two fingers, you're able to apply so much less pressure, or at least the most amount of pressure that you need. You know, you only need the pressure of those two fingers, and that's been the case on basically any motorcycle I have ridden that has had a disc brake on the front wheel. Right, it makes all the sense in the world. And I used to be one of those riders that used to use their whole hand like this to brake. Don't need it. You really don't need to do that. You've even got some riders as well that only use two fingers to change gear, because really you only need to take off the pressure by about that much. So you look, the bike isn't engaging the clutch, you see. So a lot of riders just use two fingers for changing gears. It's fairly straightforward. And you know, if you want to do that, then by all means do that. That's again quite a good habit to get into. But that's the thing, with the clutch, it doesn't really matter how much pressure you put on the clutch, because you're just disconnecting the engine from the rear wheel. But when you are actively trying to stop the bike, you're constantly putting the brakes under pressure until you have come to a complete stop. All right, so that's why using two fingers on the brake is very, very important, and I heavily recommend it. All right, yeah, it's two fingers, gradual pressure, more and more pressure as we approach this roundabout here. Yeah, just stick to it. The anticipation. I saw that bus was coming out, so I came off the throttle immediately and started braking as soon as I needed to. Things like this happen all the time, guys. So anticipation is perhaps one of the most important, if not the most important skill you will ever learn on a motorcycle, is anticipating when you have to stop. That's a nice jigsaw. That's a very nice jigsaw. And this goes for any motorcycle. I mean, I know we're doing this on our Ninja 125 just because it's our beginner bike. And I feel like doing these kind of beginner riding tips tutorial videos it makes more sense to do them on a motorcycle that a beginner here in the UK will be learning on, will be riding. So here we go. Let's try doing an emergency brake here. Oh, they moved. I was going to do an emergency brake there. But I mean, that's another good tip, is that you shouldn't sit so close to cars in front of you, right? Don't ride close to cars in front of you. There's no need. Back off a little bit. Yeah, back off ever so slightly. You really don't need to get that close to anyone in front of you. I'm guilty of that myself. Unless you are looking to do an overtake, then yeah, just keep your distance. Keep your distance from as many other road users as possible. Alright, I think that's probably the the biggest tip that I can give you, just as a general rule of thumb. Stay as far away from anything else on the road as possible. That's a good little filter there. Oh no, this is going to be really bad for traffic, this road, isn't it? I think I've screwed myself here a little bit. But anyway, guys and gals, I'm not gonna keep you any longer whilst I'm stuck in this traffic. So thank you ever so much for watching all the way to the end of this video. By all means, please leave a like, get subscribed. All right, help us out with the YouTube algorithm if this has helped you out. All right, it really helps content creators, all right, if you leave a like and leave a comment as well. Let us know if there are any further tips for beginner riders when it comes to braking. I mean, it's a science. Braking is a science. So it's definitely one of those things where there are a lot of skills that you could apply to braking a motorcycle that are very effective, and a lot of the time beginner riders don't know about them. Like I said, I didn't know about them when I first was riding a motorcycle. I had no idea. I just knew that was a brake and I need to squeeze it to slow down. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. Yeah, and that's why we make these videos, all right? It's to try and help out beginner riders. But yeah, thanks again. Leave a like, get subscribed, as already mentioned, leave a comment, and we will catch you all in the next video. Have a good one, guys and gals. Take care, ride safe.